Hi everyone, this is Studio X, and in this video I will be showing you how to create a clean, simple, dark intro with lots of changing font. So this is a pretty dynamic intro that has really nice textures in it and is visually pleasing because of a quick changing font while still staying the same size. So this is pretty simple to do, and let's get started. So first open up After Effects and create a new composition. You can do that by pressing this little icon here to create a new composition. So I'm going to press that and I'm going to name it Dark Intro. And it will be 1920 by 1080 at 24 frames a second, and I'm going to make it 5 seconds long. Background color is black, and you can just hit OK. So once your composition is created, the first thing we're going to need to do is create the grain and texture in the background. So to do that, I'm just going to right-click in the timeline and go to New, Solid. I will make sure my solid is black, and I will hit OK. So in the Effects and Presets, you're going to type in Add, and Add Grain should pop up. So just take that, drag it into your solid. Now this little square appears, which is the preview area, so I'm just going to zoom in. And you can see there's some specks. If you're watching it on YouTube, it might compress it, so you might not see these too well. But the best way to see the details is there's this little button here, which is basically the composition exposure. So this is only when you're previewing things in After Effects. That's the only times it will actually be affected. So if you're rendering out after moving this, you won't see any effect. So if I bring it up, you see there's some grain here actually compared to the sides of the square, which doesn't have any grain. But because this is a view only, this is just to see the brightness levels in the back. So I'm just going to hit it and reset it. And I'm going to bring the intensity to 4, and I will hit OK. And you can see there's grain here now, but what I'm going to do is I don't want it to be colorful. So I'm going to go into the color settings here, and there's an option for monochromatic, and that's basically black and white. So I'm just going to check that. And you see now I have a black and white grain here. So instead of preview, I can do final output, and it's going to make it full size, and you can see all of the grain looking very beautiful in this composition already. And if you hit space, you can start previewing your grain and seeing how it flickers. So if you need the animation to be faster or slower, there's an animation tab right here, and you can choose the speed right here. I think it looks pretty good with 1 from my experimentation, and it just moves and flickers and it's all random, so it looks good. The next step is to make the very little scratch-like looking things that also appear on the projector. We are going to make another solid, so New, Solid, and I'm going to call this Specks because they're like little specks and scratches. And it goes up to the top, and let's rename the bottom to Grain. Perfect. So I will solo the Specks layer by clicking this little circle here, and that makes only the layers that you selected be visible in the composition. I don't want the grain to be rendering in the background or anything and wasting my time, so I only want to work with the specks for now. So now in the Effects and Presets, you can type in Turbulent and get the turbulent noise, bring it on top of your solid, and drop it. As you can see, now we have this cloud-looking effect, and I am looking for a different look, so I will choose Swirly. And that gives you a more rounded shapes, so like scratches, they're usually round and very random. But this is a lot right here. So for contrast, I'm just going to bring it up to 124 to make it brighter. And then in the brightness, I will make it negative around 56 or so. So now you're isolating these scratches here. I want them to be smaller, so under Transform, I will take my scale and I will start bringing it down, I think around 41 looks pretty good. Maybe I'll leave it at 43. And I will bring up the complexity so there are a lot more complex shapes. And I think maybe 9.4 looks pretty good. So as you can see, we're starting to get these really weird, odd shapes that are not just flat white lines, but a very distinct and textured look. Now they're only white on black, and we need to change that. And to change that, we are going to type in Luma for Luma key. And the difference between normal keying and Luma keying is with Luma key, you can either take out just the dark parts or just the bright parts. And for our video, we need to take out the darker because we want to keep the white, bright elements in. So I will start bringing up my number. $65 seems to be pretty good, taking out all the extra, so there was a lot in here. So now I'm only keeping the very, very bright parts, and I can take the edge feather and I can start feathering out slightly to maybe about 9.7. So now you're getting these out of focus textured blurs here, as you can see, and they're all very random, very different shapes. So you're not masking anything, we're not making anything by hand. These are just randomly generated weird looking specks here. So now let's hit play and see what comes out, and it is not moving. So in order to make it move, you're going to need to animate it by choosing the evolution, or because we wanted to match with the grain, what we are going to do is go into the evolution options, and random seed basically chooses a random number and generates the specs based on whatever mathematical equation is behind that. So the easiest thing to do is just option click on the keyframe, and it brings up this expression here. And this is nothing too difficult. All we're going to type in is time, which is 1 frame, times, and a random number, maybe like 120, just so it's jumping through many different numbers. And you can click somewhere else, and now when you play it through, every frame it jumps to a seed, like a random seed of 120 each time. So as you can see, it just basically jumps to random frames. So, and it makes it look like all these specks are just jumping around randomly on the screen. So that's looking good, and now we can unsolo this layer, and now we have the grain and the specks, and they both dance together on the screen for us. Now the next step to do here is I'm going to hide both of these so they're not slowing down my computer, and we need to create the actual text. So to create the text, you can go and right click in the composition and go to New, Text, and I will type in Studio X, and I will choose some random font. Let's start with this American typewriter. That's going to be fine. Next thing I want to do is click on this grid and guide options and pull out rulers. And I also want to click on it and pull up the title action safe. So you usually use that during broadcast when you need to make sure that any text or action does not come out of the screen when it's being displayed on different monitor sizes. But nobody really uses that anymore because most of the things are 16 by 9. But I like to use it to have a pretty good visual on where my things are placed in the scene. And over here I have an Align tab, and I can just click and it will align my text to the middle and the center. So I like the way this looks, but I just want to compress it, and I don't really care about how perfectly shifted it is because all the fonts are different, but I want to keep them in the same shape and size, so visually you're not getting distracted by the text changing sizes. So what I will do is I will just click on one of these guides, and while holding Option, I will move it. And this seems pretty good. And I will also stretch it up slightly. And once again, I will just recenter it in my composition. My next step to do here is to bring out the rulers, and you can do the rulers by just seeing all these numbers, and you can click and drag down. And I want to touch the top of my text, so it's touching the S here. And from the side, I will bring it out just so it's touching the side of the S, and then the bottom here. And then on the other side, it's going to be touching the X. Okay, so now all of the fonts and texts we're going to be using in here will need to be staying in this bounding box that we created. And it's a very good visual way to keep everything together. So before we keep on moving, we're going to make this text 3D, because later we will make a 3D camera that will animate in. So when all the texts are switching, they're slowly coming closer to the camera. And we will also make a new null object. So you can just right click, go to New, Null Object, and you can also make it 3D and parent the text to the null object. Now the next thing we're going to do is make this text be 3 frames long. And you can hold Option and hit the end of the bracket to basically shorten the text layer here. So if you have it 3 frames here, which is pretty good, you see frame 0, frame 1, frame 2, so it's 3 frames long. And now we will just duplicate this text by hitting Command D on a Mac or Control D on a PC. And I will shift this text over here and make sure it's still parented to the null. And let's rename the null to text control. And you can rename things by hitting enter. And now let's go and play with our next font. So I will double click on my text, and I will go and I will choose a font that's slightly different. So this Studio X is pretty good, and it fits into the bounding box. So you don't really need to do too much work with this font. And once again, duplicate it, bring it over, click on it, and go on to the next text. So let's hope that the next text that we choose goes out of our bounding box right here, so I can show you how to fix it. So once again, you can just hit on the sides here, hold Option so you're scaling the left and right side together, and you can let go, and now you can see it's fitting in here. I think the T squiggle going out is fine because the rest of the text stays in this bounding box. So let's go to the next font. So once again, Command D, move it over, double click on it, and let's choose the next font. And you can go to something like thefont.com to get different fonts. I have a couple of special fonts installed on here, but a lot of the ones that I used are just normal fonts that come with a Mac. So let's duplicate this text again. And I will just show you this a couple more times before we go into the next step, just so you can get a good idea of how to make sure that the text stays in the bounding box. So let me just go to some font that's really crazy big or something like this. This is pretty narrow, so what we need to do is just press on this, hold Option, and stretch it to our size. There we go. So now if I click through these fonts, you see they're visually in the same place, so your eyes are constantly focused on the same text and you know what's going on. Let's do it one more time. Find some really thick font. We got to get that thick font, you know. So let's go down, find something really, really big. So this one's once again really narrow and a little high, so we're going to need to bring it down. And it's okay if you accidentally move the bounding box like 1 pixel or so, because you won't really notice it too much, but just try to keep it generally in the same size. Let me duplicate it again, bring it over, and make another font. This time let's actually find a really thick font. There we go. So this one's huge, so if you really need to fix that, yeah, that's giant. So once again, hold Option, bring it into the bounding box, and you're good to go. So I'm going to go through and put all these different fonts in here so you can see how they all look together. So as you can see here, I have a bunch of these texts here, and I actually ended up making them 2 frames long each, just so they can flicker by faster. But the next step is, when you start getting to the last 5 or 6, is to start stretching them out 1 frame longer. So you can see this one's 2 frames long. Then this one is 3 frames long. This one is 4 frames long. This one is 5 frames long. And what I'm going to do now is duplicate this, bring it over at the end. And this is how you're going to do the type on. So like the next text appears, the text starts changing into a different font. So that's what I had at the end of the video that I showed you. So I'm going to make this one much longer. I don't know how many frames this is, but I'm just eyeballing it here. And I'm going to change the font once again, do something different. I'm going to go with this wide and impactful font here. And what you're going to do is to go to Effects and Presets, go into Animation Presets, Text, Animate In, and you're going to choose Typewriter, and slap it on this text here. Hit U on the keyboard to bring up the keyframes. Right here, hit U. Make sure that your text layer is selected when you hit that. And I'm going to zoom out because these keyframes are really far away. And what you can start to see is that this text here is actually getting typed on. So we need to do the opposite here, because we need it to appear first and then start fading away. So we're going to press this little triangle here to pull up our animator effects here. So instead of starting and ending, we're going to uncheck this keyframe. So make sure your start is at 100 and bring your end to 0. And now bring your start to 0. And when you're starting to move your start from 0 to 100, it starts typing the text away. So keyframe at the second keyframe of this text from 0 and go all the way to the end and bring it to 100. So basically duplicate the text, hit U on the keyboard, uncheck the keyframes, extend the text out, bring the end to the end here, and let's change our font because we need to do that in order to see how it types on. There we go. So now when the other text is starting to get typed off, you will animate the end. So you will start with 0 on the end and bring it a little bit past the other keyframe and make it 100. So now as the other text is getting typed away, this one starts getting typed on. I'm actually going to bring this keyframe a little closer just so they're getting typed at about the same rate. There we go. So that's looking pretty good. You're going to stretch it out to make sure that it lasts for longer. And the next step is to animate the scale of everything going up. And to do that, it is very easy. At the very beginning, you get your text control here. Hit P for position, keyframe the position, and go to all the way at the end of the text here. I'm just going to make it go to the end of the clip. And start bringing the position to the negative so it gets closer to the camera. So that from the beginning it's kind of far away, and then it starts getting closer to the camera. the last step is to make the fast glitching moving away of this text. And in order to do that, you can do it with the text control, or you can do it on this actual Studio X layer, which is what I will do. I will hit P, and I will go to when I think everyone had enough time to read the text, which is at about 3 seconds. I will keyframe the position. I will go in time, maybe 3 or 4 frames, and I will move it to a random corner right here. And you can take these rounded off edges so you can start making a curve towards, so it curves over, and then I will move another couple of frames and make a way faster move here. And I'm going to stretch out the curve just so it's nice and angled. And then I will move a couple of more frames over, and I will bring it over to this corner. So now I'll actually bring it a little bit closer, and then just like before, you can hit Option and end bracket so it gets cut off right before it reaches the end. And now all you need to do is enable the motion blur and enable it on the layer as well. So I'm actually going to disable all these other ones that I have here enabled for some reason. So now you can see the text starts moving, and I will actually right click on the first keyframe, go easy ease, just so it starts off kind of slow and then starts moving in this fast edgy motion. And someone commented that they didn't really like this motion, and I agree, but I just wanted some kind of interesting way for the text to go away instead of just disappearing. So hopefully this tutorial was helpful for you, and before you export, you just need to make sure to enable the specs and the grain so you can really see your intro in full glory. So I have a Patreon page, and if you can go on there and check it out and support it, I have lots of project files that get included with my tutorials, as well as some other freebies like Cinema 4D templates and project files, and Photoshop templates and project files. There's many different tiers, so depending on your budget, you can choose different tiers and help support my channel and help me create more videos for the future and hopefully turn it into a full-time thing. Hopefully this tutorial was helpful for you in some way and you learned some nice tips, tricks, or different ways to use After Effects. If you liked this video, please leave a like. If you didn't like this video, please let me know why. If you have any questions, be sure to comment down below, and if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. I will have lots of other tutorial videos coming out in the future. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.